Today we're here to conduct a wet end rebuild kit on a Sandpiper S1F standard duty aluminum Buna pump. We have available Sandpiper wet end rebuild kits that include diaphragms, seats, and check valves. This particular wet end kit you can refer on the back side as the part number as a 476-194-360, and also the components listed for each wet end kit. We also have our service and operator's manual available with every pump purchase. You can also refer to the parts breakdown. You can also download the service and operator manual online at warrenrupp.com. The S1F unit we have selected today, we've already removed the suction manifold, discharge manifolds, and the check valves and seats. So to get to the diaphragm assemblies, underneath the outer chamber we need to remove the 8 cap screws on the outside with a 1/2 inch. Once we remove the outer chamber, we can now loosen the one diaphragm assembly. With a 7/8 end wrench, simply unscrew the diaphragm plate assembly from the diaphragm rod. You should have the outer plate, the diaphragm, and the inner diaphragm plate. There's also a bumper underneath the plate assembly. Remove all these items and all you'll have was the diaphragm rod sticking out. Sometimes this assembly will come out with the diaphragm rod, so as you remove this, you may have the rod come out with it. With the second chamber cap screws removed, remove the second chamber. You should be able to just lift the assembly out. Now you have the diaphragm rod, the bumper, inner plate, diaphragm, and outer plate. Remove the rod from the outer diaphragm plate assembly. We clamp this in a vise with soft jaws for. With the diaphragm rod clamped in the vise with the soft jaws, we can now remove the second outer diaphragm plate. With the diaphragm assemblies removed, certain items we're going to be reusing. The outer diaphragm plates will reuse, the inner diaphragm plates will be reused, and the bumpers. You want to save these components, clean them, inspect them. You want to look at certain areas like these radiuses to make sure they are nice and round. If for some reason they have worn a sharp edge on them, you may need to dress them up, re-round the outer chambers, take the sharp edge off of them. Same as the inner plates. Make sure there's a nice round edge, or they're not deflected or bent or worn in any way. Diaphragm rod, make sure it's in very good condition. Same way with the inside of the intermediate. This is the air side of the pump, how the diaphragm blows out on a discharge stroke. Make sure everything is good and clean in here. The cleaner the inside of the pump, the better the air side components are going to perform. You can also inspect the U-cup seal, make sure it's not ripped or a piece torn out of it. You can also inspect the bearings and make sure there's no wear or egg shape to them. When inspecting these components and cleaning them, just use something simple like Scotch-Brite or emery cloth to dress the edges up to maintain the radius. Also, if you note, the work surface we are currently working on is rubber. A lot of the surfaces on these components are machine surfaces, so not to scratch them, we use a soft surface, cardboard, rubber, or something when working with machine parts. With the diaphragms removed from our Sandpiper wet end repair kit, depending on the material we are using, this particular pump is Buna and rubber. So we want to put a little bit of lubrication on several areas so the outer diaphragm plate doesn't give you a false torque and grab on the rubber. So what we do is put a little bit of lubrication on the innermost part of by the stud, and then also around the outside edge. There will be a lubrication packet included with the wet end kits when purchased. So with a little bit of lubrication, and then we install the natural bulge of the diaphragm out towards the product. This is the natural bulge of the diaphragm right here. So we install the outer diaphragm plate, the inner diaphragm plate with the rolled edge in, reinstall our bumper and the diaphragm rod. At this time, we also want to lightly lubricate the bearing and the U-cup seal on both sides. And we'll go ahead and install this assembly into the intermediate. Once the one side is installed, just for alignment purposes, we reinstall a couple cap screws just to hold the diaphragm into place. We will take our second assembly, same as the first, lightly lubricate the innermost portion and the outside area. Natural bulge of the diaphragm is out towards the product. Our inner diaphragm plate, and install our second bumper on the shaft. We'll push this assembly in, make it easier to reinstall the second plate. From here, we will need to use a torque wrench to torque this assembly to specifications of 360 inch-pounds. We will need to hold the one side with a 7/8 end wrench, and then the opposite side we will torque with our torque wrench set at 360 inch-pounds. Once our torque has been met, we will then need to go to the very next bolt hole for alignment. So with this diaphragm being held with cap screws, we will then need to just go a little bit above torque to align the next set of holes, which is right there. Once this diaphragm is torqued, we will spin it around and just do the opposite on this side. Remove our cap screws. Once we have secured the opposite diaphragm in place, same as before, we'll hold this diaphragm and make sure we have met torque on both sides. Actually, same thing. We need to realign the cap screws with the bolt hole. So once we meet torque, you never want to back off on this assembly. You always want to go to the next bolt hole. Once both diaphragms are torqued, you're now ready to reinstall the outer diaphragm chambers. With the serial number plate on top, this is the discharge of the chamber. This is the suction side. You want this part of the chamber to point up. We will go ahead and reinstall one of the outer chambers. Once we have started all the cap screws by hand, we will use a star pattern to tighten them. There is no specific torque on these cap screws. All you're doing is compressing the outer chamber to the inner chamber to get a good squeeze on the diaphragm. Once that chamber is installed, you can now invert the diaphragm, since it's on the suction side, over to the discharge stroke. Make sure your serial number plate's here, This is the discharge side of the chamber. Make sure both chambers line up with each other. Same as the first chamber, we will now do a star pattern to tighten the cap. Once both outer chambers are installed, we are now ready to install our manifold assemblies, check balls, and seats. Prior to installation of these components, you really need to check the ball guides in your chambers to make sure there's no sharp edges or worn areas inside here. If you see any sharp edges, use an emery cloth, crocus cloth, or something to dress the sharp edges up. It could cause premature wear on a check ball and in other areas. So please make sure the ball guides are in good shape prior to installation of the check balls. The check ball seats, there is no up, there is no down. They can go in either way. So we're going to install the check balls, one on each side, one seat on each side. Our suction manifold can go on either way. It really doesn't matter. Once we get it lined up, similar to our outer chambers, we usually like to do a star pattern from one side to the other. Once the suction manifold is installed, you can go through and double check them with an end wrench. Make sure they're snug. These cap screws have a lock washer to secure them into place. This does not have to be a metal to metal surface between here. There is a gap. All you're doing is compressing the two castings against that seat. So we need to go around and just simply make sure the cap screws are secured into place. There is no torque value on these particular items. All you're doing is compressing the two castings with the seat in between. As the previous side, inspect these surfaces to ensure good sealability on the seats. It doesn't matter which way they go in. Same as the suction manifold. It can go on either way. Use the star pattern. Once all the cap screws are started by hand, not to cross thread anything, then we can go through them with a star pattern and snug everything down and secure them into place with an end wrench. Once all the cap screws are snugged into place, our rebuild is complete. Make sure when repairing one of the Sandpiper units that all the components in the wet end kit are utilized. We have 2 diaphragms, 4 seats, and 4 check balls. Make sure you replace both diaphragms in the pump. If one diaphragm fails, both diaphragms are going to have the same amount of time on them, so it's important to use all the items out of our repair kits when rebuilding a pump. Also, our pumps are rebuilt with standard wrenches. This particular unit requires very few tools and pretty much a standard set of sockets, standard set of end wrenches. We did use a 3/8 drive impact gun for ease of disassembly and reassembly. Also, once the unit is repaired, you can also put it on a test tank. Check your pressures, run it slow for priming. Once the pump has run a little bit and primed, check it for leaks. Double check all the hardware and the fasteners to ensure that the cap screws have stayed secure into place. And then once the unit is in a system and up to operating temperature as well, and check and inspect for leaks in case any of the gaskets or anything have creeped. And once the unit has run for a short period of time, it should be good to go that you can run at full air capacity.